You're listening to the Christian Indie Artists and Songwriters Podcast, the place where faith, music, and life intersect. We exist to help Christian indie artists and songwriters just like you get songs heard. All right, I'm here with my friends Mike and Joe from the great band Render the Hearts. How you guys doing tonight?
Good.
Pretty good.
Awesome. Well, you guys are coming to us live from West Virginia, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. We have a mutual friend, Craig Smith from The Astronaut and the Artist, who we actually did an interview with a few weeks ago as well. And so I'm so glad to meet you guys and hear your story. So kind of on that note, how did you guys, you can insert independently or however you want to, but how did you kind of get into music in the first place? What was your story where that initial fire kind of started?
You want me to go first?
You go ahead.
So my dad is a musician, and so a drummer, and he started teaching me drums when I was really little. 4 years old, basically. He said as soon as he knew that I could count to 4, he felt like I was ready. I've been basically playing music my whole life. I sat in with his bands as a kid, and in elementary school, I played in a kind of an oldies rock cover band, played drums, and then transferred to playing bass later in like the middle school, 7th, 8th grade, and then started playing guitar, playing like Southern gospel, country gospel type stuff all through high school. And then I played in marching band and was in the jazz band and stuff. And then in college is when I really started jumping into contemporary Christian music, which is where I am now.
I didn't really grow up playing as much. Both my parents are musicians as well. I took piano lessons when I was very young and hated every second of it. Really regret hating it because I would love to have learned a lot more. But
you mean you didn't practice? Like your mom made you practice, but you didn't want to practice? Like, right?
I did at first, but it kind of died off real quick. And plus, like, I wanted to be able to, like, play songs that I knew. And when you start out playing piano, obviously, you got to learn your basics. And, I wasn't the brightest kid in the crayon box. So, I didn't really understand that. But anyway, so took piano lessons, didn't really dig into it as much as I should have, but I got into band when I was in middle school. Middle school was kind of hard for me, and I was just kind of struggling to figure out who I was and didn't feel like I was good at much, and started playing drums in band, and that was just kind of the thing that like motivated me to practice because I felt like I was pretty good at it, had a good understanding of it. Played marching band, did drumline, and that was my main thing. Really didn't play drum set hardly at all until I started college. I had a drum set, but I didn't really play it a whole lot. My town was very small, and we didn't have a whole lot of opportunities to play music out. So band was my kind of main thing. Once college hit, I joined a Christian rock band, and through that band, actually, that's how I started playing music with Mike's band, and then we met in Marshall's drumline as well.
Marching band is kind of, we may talk about this later, but marching band is really the thing that brought Joe and I together, and really the rest of the band together is marching band. We all kind of have that thing in common.
I was going to say that. That's interesting that you guys were both in marching band growing up, and especially you both kind of were in drums in general. So,
yeah.
A lot of times drummers, there's that thing, there's that special, I always think like drummers are like, this is not a bad thing. I always think like to be able to separate your extremities in that way has always been like the most incredible superpower to me. So that's awesome that you guys are both. So as we'll probably get into this later too. Yeah. But like, as far as like when you write together, are you writing from drummer's perspective, or is it a completely different side of your mind when you're writing together?
I almost never start that way. Like I've actually like lately tried to be more intentional about starting from the rhythmic side of things. It's for me, like as a drummer that has been kind of removed from drums. I actually should say this too, like both Joe and I have college degrees in percussion. Like we both have music education degrees, both with percussion focus. And for me, so I'm removed from that at this point and, play mainly guitar. And so like that's guitar and piano, like I'm typically writing from that point. And I think sometimes that's gotten me into trouble. And so lately when I've sat down, I've tried to be more intentional about coming from a rhythmic standpoint.
It's cool because, like I did notice like the latest song that I've heard from you guys, like it's extremely like groove oriented, and I love that about it. So I wondered if like, obviously there's a lot of rhythm in your guys's history and DNA. So that's really cool to hear that. So going from like the marching band background, and then it sounds like, you guys mentioned you guys met sort of in some sort of a, like, did you say like some sort of a marching band thing, or did you just have that in your common past?
No, we met in college in marching band, in drumline. We were both on the snare line at Marshall University.
Okay, so how did you go from that to like, first of all, like getting more focused? Obviously, you're going to school, you're going to college for music, so like you guys are really both into that. But like, how did that go from like that side of things, from that performance side of things, into more of like a band songwriting thing? Like, how did that focus kind of shift for you?
We were involved in a campus ministry where we were, involved in the worship team. And so we started leading worship together. I was, in a band of my own, and he was in the Christian rock band that he mentioned. Yeah. And so then at school, marching band, percussion ensemble, all that stuff, we did that stuff. But then we were also leading worship. And I think that would probably be the thing that ended up bringing us together to do what we're doing now.
It's really funny because, like, our first semester of college, I think we maybe, like, we were with each other, like, in every single class. Mm-hmm. And we maybe talked, like, I don't know, 10 times more than a few words.
We had to, yeah.
Yeah, like, and so, like, the first semester, we were just not, like, really weren't friends. Like, we were just kind of acquaintances. And then the next semester, it was just almost instantly the complete opposite.
Well, there were girls.
There were girls.
That was some of it. So, like,
definitely part
there were
of
a couple girls that were best friends that we were both interested in. The girl that I was interested in is now my wife. So anyway, I think that was probably really what brought us together. I hadn't even thought of that. Like that, I hadn't thought of the first semester us being like, other than just being in the same space. So the girls, maybe,
probably,
and the campus ministry.
We had both also like recently recorded. Like his band had recorded an album, and then my band had recorded an album, and so we kind of started geeking on that kind of stuff.
That's true.
And nerding out on recording gear and
then we ended up our sophomore year. We ended up being roommates. So like we weren't, we just met at college and then ended up being roommates, and recorded a lot of stuff in our dorm room. And
that's cool. So God was definitely bringing you guys closer and closer together along the way. And that's pretty awesome. So with that in mind, like, when did you guys say, okay, like we were acquaintances and we're buds and we're roommates, like now we're going to be bandmates? Like, how did that kind of happen?
Man, this is good because like we tell this story a lot from the stage, and it's I think it's funny. Maybe it's not, but
yeah, I'm excited to hear it, man. This is a new stage. It's the podcast stage.
We're both in separate bands, right, and leading worship and doing that kind of thing, doing open mics on campus and around the town, and both those bands just, I don't think they'd officially broken up yet, but like they were on their way out. We sat down at Taco Bell and we're just like, this just kind of like what you're talking about. Like God has kind of obviously, like God has put us together to do something. We knew
that. I knew that from a really early place. Like from the first couple times we played music together, I knew there was a reason that we we knew each other and we're getting closer.
So we're having this conversation, and we had another mutual friend who also on the drum line, also studying music at the time, a little younger than us. So I call him up and I say, "Hey, man, you interested in being in a band?" And he said, "Dude, I'd love to play drums in a band with you." And I was like, "Well, Joe's going to play drums. Do you know how to play piano?" And he said, "Well, I took some lessons when I was a kid." And I'm like, "Well, great, you're hired." And so that comes along. And then our guitarist is his brother. That connection straight from, he's a saxophone player. He's actually the only guy in the band. Our guitarist is the only guy in the band that's not a drummer first. Wow. Because our current bass player, who's much younger than the rest of us, is also a drummer first. And he just grew up in the same church as both Shane and Race, our keyboardist and guitarist. That kind of connection is what led him to the band. But yeah, so Taco Bell, girls. What was the other thing? Oh, God.
God. And you're thinking outside the bun because you're at Taco Bell.
Right. There you go.
That is right.
So from there, like that was 2012. So we met in 2008. So this is a 4-year span of time that all this is kind of coming together. So beginning of 2012 is when Rend of the Hearts really started to form. We had written some songs together. And so like April, I think, is that when we played our first gig together as a band in 2012. And so we did several months of gigs and then started working on our first record, which we released early 2013, which was a collection of songs that we'd basically written separately, a couple of mine and a few of his.
If you think of our first gig, we like the first time we ever played, I don't think we had ever even practiced until the night before. And it was like we spent like 6-7 hours practicing.
Yeah.
And then played the next day.
It was.
And the piano player and guitar player, their dad is our sound guy. And that was the first time I had met him, I believe. And he is an incredible musician.
Yeah.
Like,
wow.
He's probably the best musician in the band.
Absolutely.
So
like phenomenal keyboard player.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten that piece. I'm glad you brought that up. So we're practicing, and I just made some kind of mention like, hey, it'd be really cool if we had somebody that could do sound. And I was coming at it from the perspective of maybe not anybody that knows how to do sound, but somebody that we could just train to kind of, I call it fader jockey, if you will.
Yeah.
And Race, our guitarist, he said, well, my dad's a musician and is interested in doing sound. I was like, do you think he'd do it for us? So he's been, a really, really big part of our success as a band. Because there aren't many bands, local bands. I'm doing air quotes as I say local bands.
Yeah.
That have the opportunity to have a full-time front of house engineer. He goes everywhere with us. He's a member of the band.
Okay, so 2013, you put out your first release. So take us through being a band and the brotherhood of that. And I know there's a ton of stories and stuff, but what are some highlights or things that you might, because we have people that are worship leaders, that are solo artists, that are everything in between. So any kind of funny stories or moments that have kind of propelled, because that's a lot of bands go through a lot of changes and some kind of give up. So what's some stuff that has kind of kept you guys together and moving towards over this past 8 years? What are some things that have kind of held you all together?
There's a lot of things. There's a ton of things. Really, we just believe in what we're doing, and the one who allows us to do it.
Yeah.
But because we've been doing it for so long too, there's just so much history between us all. Mm-hmm. We have so much respect for each other. It hasn't always been pretty, but at the same time, we've grown as a group and through all of it. So there's so many stories.
I think for me, the thing that kind of pushes me to continue, because really we kind of started this thing, and Joe and I were kind of at the end of our college careers. The rest of the guys kind of in the beginning and middle of their college careers. So we're kind of, I get married. There's been lots of life season changes outside of the band. And those types of things, I think, are what halt people. And I think for me, what propels me and makes me continue to push is it's apparent at every turn that God has ordained us to do this. And I think, and I don't say this to be proud, but I say it to be just trusting Him and seeing that no matter where we are, no matter what issue comes up, He's always provided a way out. I'll give you an example. Early on, starting out, we're using, crap equipment. But it was some of my stuff and some of Barton, our sound guy stuff.
Our role was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if it is broke and still works, don't touch it.
Yeah, so we're using this junk stuff. I had been, my dad had given us a trailer that was a huge blessing, but had a leaky roof and, all these things. And we're using old school Mackie soundboards. And I don't think we ever probably sounded bad. People kept coming and kept inviting us back. But it felt like a hindrance, right? And so we ended up meeting this lady, she called me one time and she said, "Hey, I want to buy you guys a bus." We were traveling in I think at that time, my dad's F-150 pulling the trailer. Like we'd take, another car following us, and huge blessing. Like I almost feel bad, like I'm complaining about what we had. I mean, it was a blessing, everything we had. But she called me. She said, "I want to buy you guys a bus," and I said, I don't. To her, I said, I don't want this to come across bad, but honestly, I don't think I could afford a free bus. Like if you gave it to me, I'm not sure I could afford to upkeep it and keep fuel in it. And she said, "Well, I just really want to, sow into you guys. What can I get? Like, what can I do?" And I said, "Well, we're desperately in need of a trailer and some sound equipment." And she said, "Well, make me a list." And so like I listed out some stuff, and I think it was over $10,000. I don't remember exactly how much, but I took it to her and kind of expected her to be like, "We can do, this and this and this." And she was like, "Okay, order it." And so we ended up with a digital console, which we're still using, a trailer, which we're still using. I mean, this is 2014, 13 or 14. And so, that's just one example. I mean, there's tons of other examples of.
There were a lot of those too.
Not on that drastic of like financial type gifts, but just issues that came up that we needed to overcome that God provided an obvious way for us. Like from a recording perspective, I mean, like most of the stuff we've produced ourselves in my home studio. But we're using mix engineers, mastering engineers, and when there's money needed, even when it's not there just seems to always be provided, whatever it may be. Like there was a church that basically gave us a place to play. Every single week we didn't have a gig somewhere else. And so basically through that gig, that funded our full-length record that we released in 2016. Joe made that comment about if it is broke, what is it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it is broke and still works, don't touch it. That's actually a comment that our former bass player, which was one of our founding members, he said that all the time. And he's actually the worship leader at that church that I'm talking to you about. And
cool.
just God just using where we are in our seasons and providing us ways over issues that I think that's what propels me, to continue on regardless of what season of life I'm in. At this point I've got 2 little kids, and I mean there's much more to life than just the ministry. But because I know I can look back and see, and I can, even in our present, I can see that God is working, then that's what keeps me moving forward.
Man, that's so good. And like God, basically he needs you to do it. So he keeps making the way, you know, and that's an incredible testimony. And so, you guys have released a bunch of music and you recorded a bunch of music. So, take us through like your songwriting process a bit. Like, how does that work for you guys? You guys bring in songs individually and work them together. Like how to render the heart's songs kind of come to be.
It's different every single time.
Let me, I'm going to let Joe kind of take the lead on this, but before I do, I don't think we've got it figured out at all. I don't know that we ever will, but I think we're trying to figure it out. So he says it's different every time. And I think that's why. I think we're trying to come up with what process works best.
Okay. Yeah.
I think we have a pretty good process.
Do we?
It's not a process at all.
It's not a process at all.
I don't know. It just kind of depends. Some songs literally just start with subject matter or a line or, just something along those lines. And then sometimes it'll start with a guitar riff and then we'll say, hey, we can do something with that.
Yeah.
We
have one song, it's called Holy Is Your Name. Literally the whole song was produced at a rehearsal with no lyrics at all, like the whole song. And if you played that original rehearsal recording next to the final mix on the record, there's not a lot of difference. Like, I mean, drum parts are real similar. I mean, obviously there's a few things, and there was probably over a year and a half span of time from its inception to its completion. And so that song like that, my wife and I have written a couple songs kind of more traditionally, like, sitting down in your living room or, in your studio just with a guitar or with just piano and just kind of huffing through lines. And, there's been a little bit of that.
We did that, all three of us, for our single release of Love Is.
Yeah.
And really it kind of started from a concept.
It did.
And then, and we had some, reference tracks that we really liked, kind of the music of, but me and Sunny, Mike's wife, had kind of hashed out most of the verses and couldn't come to a conclusion on the choruses, and Mike threw the choruses in there.
So I think that song, I had kind of started on like some chords, like some chord progression stuff in Logic in the studio. So we kind of had that to go with. So we weren't really coming like writing at the piano or writing at guitar. So they hashed out the verses, and then if I remember correctly, I put the rest of that demo together with just nothing in the choruses, lyric-wise. Added the chorus in after the fact. So like kind of the whole song was kind of done except for that chorus and the hook. So yeah, and that was kind of an interesting one. And then this most recent one, I cut the whole demo, full band demo with no lyrics at all, sent it to Joe, and he wrote the lyrics over it.
Except for the woes.
That's Broken Things?
That was all. Yeah.
Yeah. Except for, like the woes in the instrumental, like that. I'll take the credit for that.
The woes are all Mike's, so that's noted for all to hear for all eternity.
But yeah, so really, every song has been different in some way. So like maybe there's not a process. For us, it's just,
We have had some failures trying to write, like, just, I don't know. I'm a very picky person, and
he is.
It's bad. It's a problem. But I don't always work well with others. We've tried to write some songs as a full band, and it was really hard. Like, it was just really difficult to get somewhere because everybody's minds were in just different places, and all in good places, just not the same place. And which everybody has had a part in the songwriting, like of every song, pretty much. But when we try to do it from scratch, it's kind of difficult. Musically, I think we do really well.
Agreed.
Lyrically, it's kind of tough, I think.
I agree, and like we've had some success as a trio, myself, Joe, and Sonny in the same room with lyrics. But even then, it's
still pretty tough.
Still, it's difficult, and I think for me, it's sometimes discouraging. But looking back, even in those times that were, maybe we left the session and didn't feel like anything came of it. For example, that "Holy Is Your Name" example, like I left that session and it was fun to play and fun to get the recording. But I remember driving home thinking, well, that was dumb. We just spent 3 hours and didn't get a single lyric. But like looking back, how the song came together, like that was probably the best way for that song to come together. Because had we been, hashing out lyrics, a lot of the musical ideas that ended up being in that song, because it's really way different than any of our other songs. Like there's a couple like little halftime breakdowns, got a guitar solo. Like it's different. And I think those things wouldn't have happened had we been trying to mold that type of stuff over lyrics. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I love the idea that like it kind of keeps it fresh for you guys, because it's not like, okay, Mike and Joe are going to bring in the song. We're going to write this, that, and the other. It's like, it kind of keeps it fun and creative because it's just, you're kind of going in the moment. So I think that's awesome. So another thing too, I wanted to ask you guys about is, I noticed that you've released some covers, and I mean, your Reckless Love cover is pretty massive streaming wise. Like what part of the idea, because as songwriters, like, we want to do that, but also the value in covers. So how did you guys come to decide to kind of release some covers?
And I avoided it forever. Are you familiar with Boyce Avenue?
Yes, sir. Okay. The giant YouTube band.
Yeah. So I was a big fan of them in college. Just avoided doing covers, and not because of them, but like I didn't really know, I didn't understand. I guess like I thought one thing about it. I thought it was almost like I was cheating to a degree, and the whole legality of it. at this point, you've got all these distribution companies that like take care of that legality for you. Like you pay a yearly fee. And so I avoided it for a really long time. And the first cover we ever, like, of course we were covering songs at our gigs, worship songs and even other songs. We even did, some coffee shops and did some pop tunes, things like that. But that Reckless Love cover was the first one. And it was literally, I had heard the song and thought, that's a cool song. We had just written Love Is, and we recorded the cover and the video just as promo for Love Is. Like that was its entire goal. We did it, just Joe and I, just to keep it simple and quick. Our video guy came to my studio. We filmed the video there in an evening. It's live, like it's live recorded video. Like we did it all in basically one take, real simple. And it was timing that has made it do so well. When I can't remember exactly when Corey Asbury released it at the end of 2017 as a single, I think. And so this was like February of 2018 that we're finishing up Love Is, going to release it. I guess it was the end of January because we released it on the 14th of February.
It was real soon after he released it.
So, he just released the record with that on it. So it hadn't gotten big yet when we released it. Like, it was maybe 3 weeks after he released the record. I'm not sure the exact timeline, but that was literally just a timing thing. If you want to call it a God thing, I believe that he had his hand on it because it was nothing that I had no idea. Like it's almost a little bit discouraging because, we released it to promo Love Is. On Spotify, it's got over 200,000 streams, and Love Is has under 10,000 streams. And so it's kind of like, but a blessing, at the same time, because, even though that's a cover, like that's streaming revenue that we've used to fund some of our other recording projects.
And, those new listeners who found the song that came back to you, listen to Love Is,
Absolutely.
So like, but like you said, like, God's in it. And, based on your story, like every decision you guys have kind of made is like Holy Spirit just is in it. So yeah, that timing was exactly where it needed to be. So I love that. So man, this has been a great story. So one thing I always like to ask is some advice. And I know that you guys have a ton of advice and wisdom because you've been doing this, that's for a while, but like, what's something that you'd tell our audience? And you can both say different things if you want to, like some advice you'd give to your younger selves, maybe getting started, some encouragement or something like that you could give to our audience to just kind of encourage them along their journey.
I think for me, and I don't really know that this is something that I would necessarily tell my younger self because I think I need to tell myself this daily, is don't play the comparison game. Looking back through relationships that I've built with other bands, with other worship leaders, and social media makes this so easy to do, and it makes it so dangerous, is to look at somebody else's success, or not necessarily success, but just like, like as a musician, like you want to play with, big light shows, and, like you see these pictures, and I remember doing that so much, and I still do it to a degree, but I've gotten a lot better at just being a part of the process that God is, or maybe not the process, but being a part of who God is making me as a person, and as a musician, as a worship leader, and just being present in that, and not being worried about, obviously streams matter and views matter, like in the long game, but at the same time, like accepting and trusting that He knows what's best and being okay with that. I think that's, like I said, something that I wish I would have done a better job at years ago, and wish I did a better job at even now.
To piggyback off of that, something we kind of talked about early on, it was one of our, quote unquote, come to Jesus meetings in the band. We should always bring our best before God. And like I would just encourage people to practice and do the legwork. Like just put in the time at home by yourself, and preparation goes a long way. God deserves your preparation, like 100%.
Scripture teaches us to play skillfully. Yeah, there's definitely balance, and I think it's the heart of where you're coming from. But for us, like that's something we've talked about from the very, very beginning is that's actually kind of our mission statement, if you will, is to bring our best before God because he deserves that. And that's not just musically, like that's with our lives, how we present ourselves standing at our merchandise table after talking to people, how we talk to, pastors and promoters and people in the quote unquote business side of what we do, all of that. God deserves our best. And so I'm glad you brought that up, Joe.
So, on that note, like, what's the best way for people to connect with you guys and, all your social medias and all that stuff? Like, what's the best way for people to reach out and connect with you?
If you just type in Rend of the Hearts anywhere, it should bring it to us. At Facebook.com/Rend of the Hearts, Instagram.com/Rend of the Hearts. We're there. YouTube /Rend of the Hearts. Our website, rendofthehearts.com. Should be pretty easy. I think if you just Google, Rend of the Hearts. At this point, I've done it on my own computer, so like I guess like Google like remembers that stuff. I don't really know how that really works, but you should be able to find us. Should be really easy to stream our newest single, which is Broken Things. We just released a couple weeks ago now. Yeah. If you go to our social media or our website, you'll see that stuff. Got a cool video, and we're really excited about it. Got some other stuff in the works with that song, as well as been writing some other things, and hoping within the next year or so to put out a full-length record.
Awesome, man. Well, I'm definitely personally excited to hear that, and I know that other people that are connecting with you through this are too, man. So before we go, I always like to pray over the guests. So I'm going to pray for you guys. God, thank you so much for Mike and for Joe and for Rend of the Hearts and the whole family atmosphere and all that they're doing, God. And just thank you for continuing to encourage and just give them the motivation and inspiration to continue to chase after you and all these cool blessings that they mentioned here, but all the ones that they didn't even mention, that you've just been guiding them and continue to encourage them to do this thing, God, because you have a plan and a purpose for them as individuals, as men, as families and everything, but also as a unit in their band and all they're doing to glorify you and grow your kingdom here on earth, God. So just pray as they're in this writing season, that divine inspiration and creativity and wisdom just pours into everything they're doing, God, so that they can continue to do everything as the mission for their band with excellence for you and give you your best, because God, you're worthy and so much more worthy than anything we could ever give, God. But I love the idea that they're trying with everything they have to give all the glory to you with their best, God. So we just pray this next season is the best yet for them, God, and the people that they reach and impact just make real change in hearts as they just continue to chase after all that you've put before them, God. We thank you so much for your sovereignty and your guidance. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, man, it's been great.
We want to help reach as many Christian indie artists and songwriters as possible, and one way we can do that is with your help. So if you could take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes, that would be so appreciated. This is how the iTunes algorithm will push this content out to more and more Christian indie artists and songwriters. So like I said, if you could just take a couple seconds, leave us a review, that would be so awesome, means so much to us, and we would really appreciate it.